Sure.
Just give me a high five. Good morning. So there's nothing worse than having a presentation all ready to go and you walk in the room this morning and she says, myth busting, principles of adult learning. And I'm like, oh, crap. Everything I just put together and have learned is going to change this morning. So how am I going to deal with this? But actually it worked out perfect. It just kind of rolled right in. Molly did a great job of rolling right into mine. And I think whoever's next, Cynthia, will also fit into this as well. So make your training fun. How many like lecture? Oh, Dave, you really are a Luddite. I hate lecture. I hate the term lecture. You know, as a garden writer, they've got this list of all the things that you might do, presentations, so forth. It's all lecture. I do lectures. I hate lecture. The word to me connotates you're going to sit, well, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock yesterday morning. So enough said, right? So to me,
as an example.
That's right. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Thank you. So to me, Master Gardener training has to be fun. It's, for me, training Master Gardeners, they have to be fulfilled. They have to enjoy what they're doing. Above all, it has to be fun. And I think Natalie or somebody else asked about that earlier. Somebody else asked about how do you make it fun? And then, of course, we all know that if you have food, they will come. So food, fulfilling, and fun is what it's all about. We always have food at our workshops. We also make sure Master Gardeners bring in food, help each other out, and that social part of it. And I'm glad you said that, Dave, because we're wrestling with that, grappling with that idea of that online, that hybrid, but I just insist that there's got to be that social connection. That's why people volunteer. So during the growing season, we all have great accessibility to training programs. Garden walks, going out in the garden, taking an organized walk where you're walking through, talking about plants, talking about problems and so forth. Demonstration garden tours. We all, or almost all of us, have some access to a demonstration garden where we can schedule a walk going through that garden, talking about the plants. Diagnostic walkabouts. In Ohio, we have several diagnostic walkabouts for our Master Gardener volunteers, especially our Ask Master Gardeners, where we'll meet in an arboretum. We'll just walk around and see what's happening on June 15th in that particular area and talk about those pest problems, pest management problems, because again, it's constant learning and constant hands-on. Hands-on workshops. So if you have an arboretum, what a great way to get some of the work done. Teaching, training, showing them how to do it, and then having them help you do it as well. Plant identification, tree surveys, we use that as a teaching tool, and then diagnostic workshops. One of the things we do in Ohio is, as for Master Gardener volunteers, we have 4 diagnostic workshops around the state. We have teachers in the morning where they teach a specific topic. This last year, it was pest management on herbaceous and a more specific entomology talk. And the afternoon, we do hands-on samples. And that was a really good question earlier about, do you pass samples around? Do you pass handouts around? Is it distracting? Well, instead of doing the samples during the classes, we give them that afternoon to go 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, to go around the room with a worksheet and actually work on trying to diagnose those plant problems. Then we come back together and each of us go through one of those samples and talk about, this is this problem, but not just that, but the diagnostic process. So it's a very good hands-on learning opportunity for them to participate in. And again, just, taking that opportunity for your local gardens, your local garden center, whatever you have available to you in terms of outdoor during the summer is very easy to do. Cultural tours, cultural learning. Denise and I take a group of Master Gardener volunteers every year to Ecuador. They're learning not just about plants and the culture of planting and working in a garden somewhere else, but also the cultural aspects of that. We had a Mingo, which is a group work day, and then we have a group lunch where they bring all this food, they put it out on this nice blanket, and then we all participate and we all eat. So that cultural experience that they get, again, is that hands-on learning. I have the fortune to have a great natural area, Clifton Gorge Nature Park, or State Park, and every Friday, I did this several years ago, and I would encourage anybody to do this, especially you young people. See, I didn't say millennials. Every Friday, I block from 1 to 3 o'clock, March, April, and May, and that is my wildflower walks. And it's as much for me as it is for them. And we could have anywhere from 1 to 20 people on this walk. And every week we go out and we learn. And the great thing about doing it weekly is that everything changes. There's something each week that's different. And then they start bringing their friends. So we have a great opportunity for hands-on learning. And it's always just very spontaneous in terms of what might be available. I mentioned our tree surveys. We did tree surveys for several years throughout Ohio, and we took this opportunity to get the work out of master gardeners, but we also made it a training. In order to be able to do the tree surveys, they needed to be able to identify those trees. So we would have training workshops, tree identification, how to use a Biltmore stick, how to use the diameter tape, what is DBH, diameter at breast height, and of course, you always have fun with master gardeners. What? Well, of course it changes, and of course our volunteers are a little bit older, so diameter breast height, one of them said, well, whose breast? And I'll just leave it at that. You gotta have a great sense of humor, right? And then you get into the winter months and hands-on becomes less and less of a great opportunity. So we'll still do, this was our first our first wildflower walk when it was quite cold, and then the last one, we always take a picture at the same spot. The last one, of course, we're in shorts and t-shirts. So we get into the winter month, the 3-hour chunks that Natalie was talking about. How do you take those 3-hour chunks? And that's the downfall, I think, of our training. We give them botany, plant physiology, entomology, you know, in 3-hour chunks, but we don't necessarily bring it all together and make it fun. So one of the things that I find, of course, we've talked about the hands-on activities in the classroom, and I'm going to talk more about group activities. The clicker technology, how many of you have used Turning Point or some of those clickers? They love that. I mean, they think that's a big thing. We've used that, and I found it very, very useful. And of course, this is older technology. You can see where it says 2008. That's when I first bought the clickers. Now you got to do the site license and all that stuff. But you saw today, joinquizzes.com, you saw today opportunities to do that. I do that for pre and post tests. I mean, you know, we do need to do those pre and post tests. And of course, I also have to say, now, the worse you do on this pre-test, that's okay. Do as bad as you can, because at the end, when you're going to do really good after this training, that's great. But it's a lot of fun, of course, teaching them how to use it. And, you know, most of them are, again, haven't used it before. Quizzes for that. And at the very end, we do a group challenge. You have that ability to get together in teams, and we get them all team names. We've got prizes. You can show who got the fastest, who got the question, the most questions right, who got them the fastest, and so forth. So other ways of making that 3-hour training kind of not as laborious. And then I give them homework. One of the chapters on turf, the homework is go to the local garden center over the next week, and they have this little piece of paper that says, evaluate the different turf grass varieties that are available. Look at inert species, all these things, and come back and tell me, is that bag worth the cost? Compare Walmart brand to K-Grow to Scott's, or fertilizers. Take your fertilizer analysis and go through and look and see if they're giving the correct amount of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot for that application. So real world experiences, making them go out and taking what they're using in the classroom and using it for practical purposes. So principles of adult learning, this is where I thought she was gonna like bust every one of these things that I learned back when I took my master's. I'm not a teacher. I'm a horticulturist, and I spent my first 4 years learning horticulture, then my first 11 years working in a garden center. Then when I got into extension, I did my master's in ag education. That's where I learned about how to teach, how, you know, some of these principles need to be applied. But I will tell you this, if you don't have a passion for teaching, you're going to struggle. You have to have that passion, that desire to teach people and share your knowledge with others. Otherwise, it's going to be a real tough road to go down, because I think passion just shows in your teaching, passion shows in your wanting to engage learners and helping them learn as well. So the principles of adult learning that I learned that really stuck with me, they're ready to learn, they're motivated. Unlike those guys who come in for pesticide applicator training classes, oh man, it's just like, we all struggle with that. How do we make this exciting? I gotta be here. They don't have to be there. They want to be there. And they're so, I mean, when our specialists come and teach Master Gardener volunteers, they love it. They have so much fun because Master Gardener volunteers are eager to eat up everything that they can give. Practical and results oriented. As I said, something that they can apply to their own landscape, their own backyard. Problem solving is another one. We have learned throughout the last couple of days, they're less open-minded, resistant to change, but we learned a way to cope with that. I think it was Monday, or no, it was Tuesday. I don't know what day it was. Today's Thursday. So we learned, no, we flew in Monday, right? So we learned that they're less open-minded, but the great thing about this group activity that I'm going to share is some of their biases start coming out, and it gives you kind of an opportunity not to change their mind, but to make them aware that as an extension volunteer, here's how we have to approach that. In your own backyard, you do whatever you want, but when you're volunteering. So it gives you that opportunity to reinforce that. And pesticides, GMOs, those are all the hot topics. They have high expectations. They want immediate results. So again, that fulfilling class that you're going to give them. So the two that really stuck out to me in terms of developing my Master Gardener training classes, self-direction, control over learning. They want to be a peer with you. They want to be part of what's happening. They want to be part of the teaching and the learning. They want multiple options for learning. Again, going back to no lecture. And initial yet subtle support, but the biggest one for me is life experiences. And fortunately, Molly said that this morning, we all bring our own life experiences to the classroom. So as I developed my first training classes, that's what I really keyed in on. How can I tap into their experiences and make it useful and make it something in terms of something they could learn? We know they have their preconceived ideas of how they garden. We do it this way. And the beauty of our program, I think, is they go through this class and they get out of there and they think, how did I ever grow anything? I didn't do anything the way you're supposed to do it. But through these activities, you can emphasize, you know, some of the important information. So group activities. This group activity I developed several, well, in 1993, and I've been using it every single time I teach a certain topic. So far, I have never, knock on wood, had a negative comment about the group activity. I know some of us we're not bashing 4-H, but we're not into group hugs. And, you know, in fact, when Molly said, put your hand on your head, I'm thinking, oh no, don't go down that path. You know, group activities are great to do, but you got to do something that fits into their lifestyle. So with this group activity, it was based on, we need your personal experiences. We need to know, you know, what you're going to be applying back in your gardening. So when I teach these classes, and it fits perfectly for herbaceous, woody, fruits, content, I haven't really figured out a way to develop for botany, entomology, I haven't quite gotten there, but for these classes, this coursework, it works. So I basically do an introduction. And again, PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, all that, I hate that, so this isn't that. But you do an introduction. You go through these first few things, for this is the herbaceous class. Introduction, you got to know definitions, you know, because we're going to test you on them and so forth. But you need to know as a master gardener what an annual, what a perennial, and so on. Then we get to this piece right here, and I say, okay, now we're going to do a group activity. I'm not going to teach, you're going to teach. And from there on, the group pretty much takes the whole class and starts teaching. So we divide them into groups. I give them an outline and let them know you are all going to be teaching. And from there, I give them this outline. And this is an essential part of this technique. Instead of just telling them, okay, you're going to be teaching bulbs and this is what I want you to cover, I have them just cover these specific topics. Otherwise, you don't know what you're going to get. But these are the important things. And of course, this is drawn right out of the chapter, right out of the book. Then they get into their groups and they get like half hour, 45 minutes. You gauge it on, you know, basically how long it takes them. Then each group gets up, takes their flip chart paper and presents it. Team teach, individual, however you want to teach it back, but you teach it back to the group. And as I'm listening to them, I'm kind of checking off some of these things because this is where you really hear the biases. This is where you hear the pieces. You know, she did the quiz this morning. This is where you gauge what they know and what they don't know. So then I go back after each segment. So I'll divide it into annuals, into bulbs, however many people we have. And I re-emphasize what they have taught. And I correct, because there are many times when it comes to, like, for instance, planting trees, planting depth, some things that they aren't quite familiar with. And the other thing that I think that's important that we don't do, at least in Ohio, you guys might all do this, because we're teaching those bits and bytes, those 3-hour segments, we don't tie everything in together. So one of the things as I'm teaching this content is I make sure that you bring in the entomology, you bring in the disease triangle, you bring in all the other pieces, not just the herbaceous section or the woody section. You tie all those in so that they can see how that applies together. I think we're really missing that component. So some recommendations to make this work. First of all, know the size of the group. I have done this for 10 people up to 50 people. 50 is a bit of a handful because you've got so many things to talk about. So you really have to manage and be on top of what they're teaching back to you. But it works really well for 25 to 30, most of our typical classes of master gardeners. Don't give them the handouts. Say, you know, I know you want to be paperless, Mike, but those volunteers still like those handouts that they take home and put in their closet and never look at them again. they're the ones that come into the class, and if they see paper laying out there and it's a handout, they're going to grab it before we have a chance to give it to them. I don't give them the handouts until after. They aren't allowed to look at their books. I'm assuming they've read the chapter, but not usually. They aren't allowed to look at the notes. This is on their own biases. And when I instruct them, you develop the content based on your experiences. And you come together as a group and you decide what the right way is to prune that annual or prune that perennial or plant that annual. What's the right planting depth? You decide as a group. So asking them to come to consensus. Be clear and concise on instructions, but it doesn't matter because they don't listen. This has always been the most fun part of getting everybody together. The one thing, and I tell every group, the one thing that I've learned with adult learners, they don't remember their number. And I can tell you every single class, and I've taught this since 1993, every single class, there's somebody wandering around looking for what group am I in, what group they just don't do that. So they write their numbers down. So each time I've done this, I've gotten better at, instructing on what they usually forget. Each person gets a flip chart and markers. And if you're teaching this for somebody else, I have the benefit in Ohio that I get to still do face-to-face teaching for a lot of classes. And Ohio is small enough that I can still drive around. So when a coordinator calls and says, can you teach this class? I say, do you have good markers that work? Because if they don't work, that just drives me nuts. So markers, flip chart paper, sticky paper on the wall, and so forth. Have a recorder, have a reporter, somebody that's going to get back. So you give them all those instructions, and many times they team teach. They can do it whatever they want. Again, they've got their own preconceived ideas. The most fun I had probably was when we did Herbaceous, and it was a very small group, probably 15 people, and just by numbers, a group of men got together and, we're doing this one section. So they did their section real quick. They flipped it over, they laid it there. They were like third in line. They put it up on the wall and it said, do what the wife tells you to do. So I made them go back and I said, no, you're not going to do that. That's not sufficient. You go back and you do this. So I make sure I put that out there and share that little story with them that, we do expect you to get this done. So recommendations, again, provide an outline. That outline, like I said, is critical. There's times I've gone to a class and they haven't printed the outline, so I always carry it with me just in case. That outline is critical so that you know what you want them to cover. Be there. As in any group instruction, just don't walk out of the room unless it's an emergency. Don't stand there on your cell phone, your smartphone, reading email. Be there to go around, answer questions, listen to them. Because you'll hear things that are really valuable that you can make sure, okay, I got to make this point when we get towards the end of the class. Praise and tactfulness. Praise is, give them a big hand. But tactfulness is something that we all have to practice. When we get to the GMOs, the biases, the, native plants versus non-native. I'm not a purist. I'll never be a purist, but, some people are. So we really work through that with very tactful skills. And have fun teaching. I have a blast teaching this. The 3 hours goes so fast. The introduction is probably 5 to 10 minutes. The rest of the time is their instruction, their teaching, and me just kind of backing up and reiterating. So some of the benefits for this, with a group interaction, they get to know each other. One of the things that's my big pet peeve, have you all sat pretty much in the same seat every day this week, right? Don't do it. Don't do it. I don't let them. They get prizes for going around and moving to different seats because they get to know others. This brings people who may never communicate, may never coordinate with each other, may never talk to each other, brings them together. It shows the different learning styles. I mean, I've watched group interactions and it's fascinating because some are really good. Some, how they are. Some group interactions just don't go so well. So they get to know each other and you get to know them as well. This is perfect. Identify those who can potentially teach or those who you do not want in front of a classroom. And we had one this last year in our particular class that she was good, but she does not need to be out in front of people. So identify those who we can train and teach this information so that they can go out then and teach others. Again, they bring their own experiences to the table. We can emphasize as they talk about some of these issues, we can emphasize, remember, research-based, non-biased. When it comes to pesticides, the label is a law. There are all opportunities for you to re-emphasize and reiterate and really reinforce some of those topics that we need to talk about. Liability, that's another topic that we make sure it always comes up in every class. They get it once, but when I teach, they're going to get it in every single topic that I'm teaching. But I do it this way. And this is a great opportunity to explain, you know, we're giving you the fundamentals, we're giving the basics of horticulture, but it doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So we know that you might be able to get by with transplanting a Japanese maple in Ohio in the middle of summer, but we know that's not the best way, the recommended way to do it. So we can reemphasize again that whole idea that this is the fundamental we're teaching you, but then there are these situations where, you know, we might do it a little bit differently. Tie in other content. As I mentioned earlier, we always tie that other content in, or I always try to tie that in. Participants start to open up. And again, on every evaluation, people like the group activity. It's not the kumbaya group hug type activity, but it's energizing. It gets them excited. I do give them the handouts after they come back and start taking notes when we finish that group activity. So again, just the adult learning. These are some of the principles, some of the basics that you can take and use in your teaching. And I just threw this in here. This has nothing to do with adult learning, but I find, and I just find this really, really bad and sad, we don't use enough pictures. Our content, I don't know how many times I go and I see specialists and I see people teach with PowerPoint words. People, we don't even need words. We can use the words. We need to show pictures, especially in the winter months. Sometimes our training is just winter training, but if we're not using pictures, samples as much as possible, we are really missing the boat in terms of training. So get a good camera, and if you don't have a good camera, get a good cell phone, but start utilizing pictures. And they don't have to be high quality professional pictures. You just have to be able to give them that visual to show what we're talking about. So again, fulfilling. They have to be fulfilled. They have to get something out of it that they can utilize. And of course, always have food. And by all means, we have a lot of fun. And with that, I would like to just say thank you to Mike and Amy and Susan for putting this together. This is the one conference of the conferences I attend during the year where everybody's talking the same story. The master gardeners and you know, raising master gardeners and really doing a good job. But also, Mike, I really thought when you had flamingos on the website, I thought, well, look at that. Mike knows I like old fashions, so he's taking care of me with the old fashions. I collect flamingos, and by golly, on the website and everywhere you had flamingos, I said, that Mike, he's just so kind. But then I realized it wasn't about me. It was, it was a flamingo story. So I will close with this. I'm leaving for Turkey tomorrow afternoon for another conference at 4 o'clock, and I asked my 2.5-year-old grandson, what do you want Mama to bring you back? And he thought just 2 seconds, and he said, Flamenco, Mama, flamenco. And I'm like, okay. And he says, 2 flamencos. I'm like, okay. I'm not sure if Turkey has flamencos, but I've got lots of flamencos to take him back from Wisconsin. So he won't know the difference.